When the sun sets, the undead awaken. To slake their hunger, they feed upon the herd of unaware mortals. Right beneath our noses, the kindred clash against their rivals as they vie for control of the city of San Francisco. Are you strong enough to cheat final death and see another night? Vampire the Masquerade Rivals expandable card game from Renegade Game Studios.
Welcome everyone to Vampire Wednesdays. I am Sarah Erickson, Director of Sales and Marketing, and I am joined this evening again by fantastic game designer here at Renegade, Matt Hyra. How's it going, Matt?
It's going just fine. Got the air conditioning on.
That's definitely important right now. It's a little toasty in Southern California, I hear.
A little bit.
Yeah, so we are actually going to be talking about a few different things tonight. So anybody watching, we will be discussing some Crypt Pack cards, the agendas and havens that we haven't really shown off very much yet. And then we are also going to be talking about, now that the Kickstarter is over, what are the next steps? So if you haven't backed a Kickstarter before, or maybe you just haven't done one with Renegade, or you're just curious about what's coming up, we're going to chat about that. So please feel free at any time if you have questions, post those in the chat. We would love to hear them. And that's one of the main reasons why we're doing this, is just to make sure you get all your questions answered easily in one place. So feel free, don't worry about if it's silly or not. I ask silly questions all the time. And so yeah, we'll get them answered. So Matt, take us away. Let's talk about first, just as a really quick reminder, what is the Crypt Pack? Just for anyone who may not remember about this.
Right. It's something that wasn't super obvious what it was at the beginning, because there's never been anything called a Crypt Pack from what I can imagine, but it's essentially kind of like a booster pack, except this pack is 63 cards large. So, and we did have several, yeah, it's sizable. We did have several of the Crypt Pack cards shown in the Kickstarter, but not all of them. So we thought we would take the opportunity to show them off. Now, the Crypt Pack has 4 new agenda, 4 new havens, 8 new vampires, and the rest of the cards are all new cards, except for 2 of them. I'll go ahead and say there's a sheriff and a seneschal. Those are titles that probably did not need to be a 3 of in the core decks, so we put the 3rd copy of each of those into the Crypt Pack. Every other card is new and 3 of, so you'll have a whole bunch of stuff that you can use to customize decks, or even just split up amongst the players to even customize the pre-con decks.
So just to clarify, there's 3 of for all the cards where you could play up to 3. So for the things like the vampires, the agendas, and the havens, you only get 1 each of those, correct?
Right. You don't need more than 1 for yourself, and you can, like we talked about before, you can do drafting of havens and agenda, things like that, to give people lots of choices. So yeah, everything is in the proper count for 1 player to come to a tournament and make their own custom deck out of every single card. But it's also nice just for if you got 1 box and want to introduce it to your friends, there's still customization you can do.
Excellent. So that's a great overview of the Crypt Pack. Thanks for reminding us all about that. So we wanted to focus today on the agendas and the havens, because those are 2 really important card types that really change what you're going to build your deck around. And one of the things that we expect people to do with the Crypt Pack is to blow apart those pre-built decks that come in the core box and start over building brand new decks. And these 2 cards really will lead you in a particular direction, if I'm understanding that correctly.
For sure, yeah. When you're starting out building a deck, you're going to want to look at havens and agenda and kind of figure out where the good combo is, and like, what's my strategy? Am I going to have a dominant clan in the deck? Something like that. You got to figure out, okay, well, if I'm going to go for a scheme deck, do I want to protect my leader because they might have the most influence, which is necessary for schemes? Or might I want to find other ways to gain influence through the haven? So you're going to want to kind of choose your haven and agenda at the same time, but you also really need to be looking for what your starting character is going to be at the same time, because it's kind of a little trifecta there, the holy trinity, maybe we could call it the unholy trinity. Let's call it that, right?
That sounds
So,
better. I think it
yeah,
would
we'll
be
call it the
inappropriate
unholy
otherwise.
trinity. We're going to coin that phrase right now. So,
We may
yeah,
need to
because
get
really
approval
you
on
need
that.
you need all three parts to really figure out your strategy, because the vampire you choose to be your leader is going to be your most prevalent character and being in play from the beginning. So you're going to want to make sure that your starting character can take advantage of the leader ability on your haven, and maybe even get you some agenda points, while other people are still building up.
Awesome. Well, let's actually take a look at a couple of those since we have them loaded up. Desiree is helping us out on the back end. We don't get to see her lovely face, but she's taking care of chat for us this evening as well. So you can say hi to Desiree if you want. So she's posted up here for us the first haven, which is the old post office. Do you want to chat about that for a moment with that?
Yeah, this is a shot of the main post office in San Francisco 6 months from now. It'll be all boarded up and closed. So
no, this is just sad now.
Yeah, I know. We were we didn't realize we were predicting the future when we commissioned this art 9 months ago, right? So anyway, yeah, this is jumping into a really meaty haven here, and we were talking about ways of getting some additional influence if you're a scheme deck, for instance. So this old post office allows, if your leader is in the coterie, meaning not in torpor, then you have the ability to use some of these smaller blood potency cards in your library as influence. Okay, now if you've paid attention in some of the previous Wednesdays, we've shown you the influence modifier cards. Those cards are only ever used to gain influence, which you need for titles and schemes. Okay, this card is another way to gain influence, and this is a haven, so it's going to be, no one's blowing up your haven, so you can't lose this. But if you're playing with some of these smaller blood potency cards in your deck and you need to generate some extra influence even during an opponent's turn, you can. And this it's a unique that you can use abilities during other players' turns, because you can't do things like use exhaust powers during other people's turns, or even payment powers unless it has a special keyword, which we'll show, you might see next week, you never know. So anyway, let's say that
maybe.
Yeah, I know. So let's say that someone is playing a scheme that you either want to have, that you want it to succeed, or you want it to fail. You can look at your hand and say, like, hey, I've got like a humiliate in my hand. That's a 3 blood potency card. I'm going to place that card face down. And if you I know some people have always asked about, can you bluff with other cards? No, but you can use the old post office. When you put a card face down and you have the old post office as your haven, they're not going to know if it's a real influence modifier card or a combat card that you're using for influence. So that is one way to sort of bluff, although by having the old post office as your haven, you're telegraphing that you have the ability to do other things. It's not really bluffing, because if you have a card down, you're going to want to flip it up and show that it gives you some extra influence, but that is a bluff of sorts. So if it's during a scheme, you're going to play the card face down. If it's trying to gain influence for a title, you'll play it face up, and you'll gain the amount of influence equal to the card's BP value, blood potency value, which is in the black spiky blood drop.
Okay, so that answers some of the questions.
There.
Well, there are a couple of questions in chat actually asking about when it says play a card from your hand, does that mean you're revealing it? Is it face down? Is it face up? So you're saying that it depends on how you're using it.
Yeah, actually the word play, I think we're changing that to place because you're not actually playing it. That's a good point. Yeah. So you're just putting it face down. You're not playing the card and getting the influence out of it. Yeah.
Right, right. I think that clears that up a little bit.
Yeah. I think we've already changed
Helpful.
that one, but that's all right.
Yeah, fair enough. Just on that note, because I'm sure people will be curious, we have made a fair number of word changes, a few minor tweaks to the card frames, things like that, a few other little minor changes, and we are going to be showing off some of those next week. We'll actually have Anita Osborne, who's our creative director, who's been overseeing a lot of those changes, joining us to chat about that. So if you are wondering what's the status of being able to see all that kind of stuff, join us next week. So that should be fun. Awesome. So this one seems really interesting. It is a little bit tricky. This makes sense to be in the Crypt Pack because this is maybe a little bit more of an advanced card. Like once you're more comfortable with the game, a little bit more familiar playing, this might be one that you would put out and have in your deck and really build around because it does do a very specific thing.
Yeah, this is for someone who definitely wants to either play a scheme or title deck, or knowing they're going to come up against other scheme decks could use to fight those off. So a couple ways to go.
Definitely. Very interesting. Well, I think we have another Haven because like you mentioned, there are 4 new Havens in the Crypt Pack, and I think we get to see all 4 of them, right?
I think we do.
Awesome. So this one is the Dockyards. And let us know what this one does.
Sure. So far, I'm sure people have noticed that all Havens say characters in your Haven have +1 secrecy. So that is that's a constant on all Havens. You do not, your leader, whether your leader is in your coterie, in torpor, or burned out of the game, you're still going to have that +1 secrecy in your Haven. The leader abilities, as we have said, are only applicable if your leader is in your coterie, meaning in play. So for this one, this is the Dockyards. Each time your leader takes 1+ damage, that means 1 or more damage, you may discard 1 card to prevent 1 damage. So if they take 1 damage, you can discard a card to prevent it all. If you take 4 damage, you can discard 1 card to prevent 1, reducing it to 3. So this is a good thing for players who have invested heavily into their leader, whether that is Li Ju Chen attaching a lot of retainers. It could be the Ventru attaching an important title to their leader, including possibly the Prince. If you're going to go for the Prince, this is a great ability to have, because guess what? You can use this ability even while claiming the Prince. All right, it's only blocks and reactions that are not allowed during a claim to the Prince. You can always use damage prevention abilities like the Vagrant or the Dockyards. So if it is your plan to become the Prince, because it is very profitable to do so, this is a great card. But it's a great card for any deck that is going to invest heavily in their leader, whether that is ongoing cards that make your leader better, or you've attached things to them like retainers and things that you'll find in future sets as well.
Yeah, I think you would also pick this depending on who you think you're going to come up against too, because if you're playing against Bruja, this might be more helpful.
Good point. If you know that your friends are, going aggro, then this is definitely a great way to go. So, yep.
Nice. Very cool. Well, let's see that next one. I'm curious about this one. So we're actually going to talk about agendas.
Oh, okay. Like. How many was that all of the, Desiree, was that all of the Havens or no?
Yeah, you had given me 2 Havens and 2 agendas.
Okay, I see. Okay. Maybe while I'm talking about these, you could grab it, click on the image, because actually all 4 were in the image. Only 2 showed up in the thumbnail. So I think people might want to see all of them. So
okay, I'll try to get those ready.
Okay,
Sounds
cool.
good. We'll chat about some agendas and come back.
We'll
to
chat about some
Havens.
agendas because, yeah, it you know, like we said, you kind of have to look at them both at the same time, so you might as well mix them up a little. So this is an agenda called Hunt the Hunters, and as you can see in the image, Hydra is cracking skulls on this Special Affairs Division guy who's a member of the Second Inquisition. So
Brutal.
So what this is, so that top sentence, and this was a question somebody had before, I think they may have seen this card, shuffle defeated Second Inquisition into the city deck. That happens no matter who defeats the Second Inquisition, okay? It's not just for you, it's any player. So it is likely that if you have Hunt the Hunters, you're gonna, in constructed play, you're gonna leave it face down until you attack a Second Inquisition. Then you're gonna flip it up, knock him out, score 1 prestige and 1 agenda. At that point, you're going to shuffle that Second Inquisition back into the city deck, so it's gonna come back a little faster than it would have normally because you're so awesome at hunting the Second Inquisition. So other people will certainly endeavor to knock out some Second Inquisition of their own, but whether you knock them out or they knock them out, you're going to shuffle them back in. Because if this is your agenda, we didn't want it to be like super easy for people to just knock out all of the ways for you to get some extra, to get your agenda and complete your goal of 13 agenda. So, yeah.
So this is interesting because I don't think we've actually talked about this before, where you start out the game with your agenda face down and then flip it up when you want to.
Right. That is actually part of the constructed game rules, where in the beginning of the book, we talk about how to play learning the game. But when we get to the constructed portion, we do mention that you actually start the game with your leader, haven, and agenda all face down. And everyone's got to have those in play before anyone flips theirs up. Because we don't want people like scoping out the table, seeing what's out there, and then choosing like, oh, no one, oh, look, no one's gonna doing any titles. I'm gonna play my title deck, so no one's competing with me. We don't want that. So we want people to have their deck fully prepared, ready to go, and then at the start of the game, you're gonna flip your starting character, your leader, and your haven. All right. You can leave your agenda face down until you trigger the ability on that. Now, for this card, it would be a good idea if someone attacks a Second Inquisition that you flip it up before the end of their turn, so that they'll shuffle that card back in, so that you can get to it.
Nice, very interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry about all this switching.
Well,
the cards are they should be in there.
Yay! All right, we can go back to Havens in a moment here. But if anybody has questions about Hunt the Hunters, I really like that this card interacts with that city deck, because that is a little bit different, and the city deck is such an important part of the game. And I also like that you're reacting a little bit to what other players are doing, and that always just makes the game more interesting. And if I were playing against somebody who had this as their agenda, I would really have to think about, do I just defend against the Second Inquisition and take it because they are pretty mean? Or do I really go after them, but know that I'm giving potentially my rival extra points?
True enough.
Interesting. Awesome. Well, let's do one more. What do you have next for us, Desiree? We'll talk about that one.
Yeah, you put them up, we'll knock them down.
Let's see. So. Let me switch it and see where it goes to. So we were at Old Post Office, Dockyards, agenda, and then so there's another agenda, and then I think we'll go back to the havens and then agendas.
Perfect. So actually, before we talk about manipulate the masses, there was a really good question of, is there only one Second Inquisition card in the San Francisco deck? And there are actually multiples. Do you want to talk about that, Matt?
Yeah. There's actually 4 copies of the Second Inquisition in the deck. So the city deck is 27 cards, but as you've all probably seen, you're going to shuffle the 10 event cards and remove 4 of them without looking and place the other 6 in there. So really it's 4 second Inquisition out of 23 cards. So almost 1 in 6. So you'll see them at a fairly, you'll see them every so often. They'll show up. And then they also, when defeated, so normally when defeated, they go to the city deck discard pile. When the city deck runs out, they're shuffled into the discard pile, which typically only contains Second Inquisition and a couple of mortals that the Ventru Haven, the Royal Retreat, may have discarded. All right. So essentially, at the end of the game, those Second Inquisition are gonna be coming out almost every turn, and you got to deal with them. So Hunt the Hunters is kind of a deck that's waiting for the end game a little bit to strike. You can certainly get those kills on the Second Inquisition throughout the game, but in the end game, you're going to be able to take one out every turn. And if you noticed on the card, it did say to gain the first time you defeat one during each of your turns. We didn't want to make it like on turn 9 you just clean up the board and automatically win because you just knock out two per turn, right? So there is a limitation there, but you are getting extra prestige because look at that guy, he's fighting the Second Inquisition to protect me. So that's a little bit of prestige in the vampire community that you would act so selflessly.
I like the way you put that. That's funny.
Right.
Awesome. Well, that definitely helps explain that one a little bit. So let's chat about Manipulate the Masses here for a second, the next agenda we have to talk about.
Sure. So you might recognize the picture there, Iris, from the Toreador. The Toreador probably the best at schemes, but the Venture second place. So anyway, so she's a Toreador, and this is real simple. When a scheme you play succeeds, gain 1 agenda. So that might not look super sexy when compared to something like, the end is nigh, the Malkavian, the pre-con Malkavian agenda that says when the first time you play or resolve a conspiracy during each of your turns, you gain 2 agenda, right? But the thing about schemes is you can do more than 1 a turn. You can do 2 of these per turn. And some of the schemes actually give you agenda. So this is fair. All right. Otherwise, for instance, the Ventru deck has a greed card, which you also saw last week, which is, should I gain 2 agenda? Well, couple it with Manipulate the Masses, you can get 3 agenda in 1 shot. So this is definitely a deck for someone who wants to do schemes. The Old Post Office certainly works pretty well with it. The Royal Retreat works pretty well with it as well, because titled vampires get +1 influence, and some titles give you influence, so that's not a bad way to go. So a Toreador Ventru mixed deck is pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about mixing decks. I think it was last week. So are there any particular vampires you would want to play with this agenda? You mentioned some havens you would play with it, but what about vampires?
Right. Well, clearly, if there's a character depicted in the art, that's probably a reasonable character to choose for that deck. So Iris does pretty well. She can get a lot of free influence sometimes. But basically, yeah, anyone who does influence type things. Mohammed on the Toreador team does. The Ventru, one of their ongoing cards is called Assert Authority, and it gives your leader +1 influence for each foe in the game. So if you're playing a full 4-player game, you can get, the first time you play one of those, your leader's going to get +3 influence. Couple that with their leader token, that's 4 influence right there. So now you have to decide, well, do I need a haven that's going to give me even more influence, or do I need a haven like the Dockyards that can protect my character that has all this influence? Because you better believe people are going to be gunning for you.
Makes a lot of sense. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's jump back to those last 2 havens we didn't chat about yet.
Fair
and
enough.
See what's going on over there.
I guess I was wrong. I guess there's an agenda.
All right,
Fun.
we'll talk about
no
strength and
problem.
numbers.
It's all good. It's all good. All right.
As long as we get to see new cards,
Surprise.
we're happy.
Yeah, as long as just keep it coming and we're all good. Yeah, strength and numbers. So this is an agenda for the classic weenie deck, right? Most decks are going to, or most strategies really only need 2 or 3 vampires to get going, because it's nice to have extra prestige so that when your characters get knocked out, you don't die off too quickly. But we wanted to have an agenda for someone who wanted to play some of the smaller vampires. Like if you're playing a bunch of, 2, 3, and 4 BP vampires, you might be able to get 4 or 5 of them into play and still have a few prestige left over. So strength in numbers, it does force you out into the streets to do this. So I'll just read it. At the start of your turn, if you control 3 characters in the streets, gain 1 agenda. If you control 4+ characters, each with 2+ BP in the streets, gain 2 agenda instead. So you do have to risk a little bit, but the thing that, and you might think, oh, it's so risky to be out in the streets and whatnot. Well, there's blocking, there's reaction cards. If you're going to play an agenda like strength in numbers, you're going to want some reactions, some defenses in your deck to protect your characters, because it doesn't matter if they're ready or exhausted. You can block, you can play reactions. You just want to keep your characters alive. And the thing that makes this good is, you might think, well, it might be hard to do, but keep in mind, it's agenda that does not require you to spend actions to do. You'll notice that most of the other ones are actions, right? It's things like succeed in your schemes, hunt the hunters, you got to knock out the second Inquisition, play conspiracies. This one doesn't. As long as your guys are out there in the streets, you'll just collect that at the start of your turn and then still have actions left over, 2 actions. You'll still have your whole turn to go after more agenda, whether that means knocking out Second Inquisition or citizens or attacking your rival. So this is a good one to just get free agenda at the start of your turn, all right? And then follow it up with other cool attacks and other strategies. So it kind of works.
As a general game question, let's talk about the start of your turn. So I've played Magic for a long time. I have untap, upkeep, draw drilled into my brain. So is there something similar that we can talk about for vampire as far as those different phases go?
There is, yeah. Let me. The way that it goes, I believe. Yeah, I've
stumped you. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry.
You didn't stump me, but I had to.
Okay.
I wasn't. Yeah. So anyway, okay. So you want to know the start of turn sequence? Right. So basically, the first thing you're going to do on your turn is, hang on here. All right. First thing is the city deck step, okay? Because we did want, you have to get rid of ongoings that have already been in play for a round, and add a new city card to the streets, all right? And we do that just so that there isn't any weirdness with characters coming and going out of their haven and all that. So essentially what happens is city deck step happens first, then it's your start of turn, all right? Anything like this that says start of turn is going to happen now. There aren't that many, but this is one. The Prince of the City, San Francisco, that is one that gets you 1 prestige and 1 agenda at the start of each of your turns. And then you will ready all of your cards and return your vampires to your haven. So that is the basics.
Nice. All right. Yeah. That's good.
Right.
So this really does happen right after the city deck thing. This is next.
Yeah. So it's not untap, draw, upkeep, whatever. It's
draw.
It's city. Yeah. Untap, upkeep, draw. Right.
Yes, city, start, ready, return. I love it. St. Bailey's has it figured out for us.
CSR is probably easier than UUD. So, and our draw is at the end of turn because it doesn't fit into the start phonetically. So we had to move it to the end, sadly.
That's why. That was the
That's a joke.
main reason. Awesome. All right. So sorry for detracting from strength in numbers a little bit. Now that we know what start of turn means, that's when we check to see if you have 3 characters in the street or all these other exciting things.
But if you have 4 or more, heck, you get 2 agenda. Like, that's crazy. Granted, it does take you a little time to, recruit 4+ characters. Essentially, whatever level of character you're trying to get to, 1 additional is often a good idea. So if you're looking to gain 1 agenda each turn, you probably want 4 characters. Sometimes you look out and get 2 agenda. If you're looking to get the 2 agenda, it's good to have 4 or 5, because 1 might get knocked out. You never know.
But that does put a target on your back. It's pretty easy if you've got 4 characters out there for somebody to come and take one of them out. And if you've got 5 characters out there, people are probably paying attention to you for other reasons anyway.
Probably. But if you've played your cards right, you might have some good blockers who are ready to take on whatever attacks might come at you. So, and keep in mind,
but they're in the streets.
Yeah. Now, I might be giving away a little bit of strategy, but I'll just say this: they don't have to all be in the same party. I'm not gonna.
Ooh, hot tips from Matt.
if there are at least 2 in a party, one of them can block for the other. But sometimes you might not want to be in a party, so. That's just a little. That's just a little thinker there for when you finally get the game. You're going to be like, yeah, I don't know. So you'll figure it out.
So just to give everybody a little sneak preview into the future, we are working on getting all of our updated versions of our cards into Tabletopia. So that allows us to do a couple things. One, it'll allow us to let people play it online again in a very limited way before you actually get all of your cards. So we'll talk about that in the future. But it also will allow us to do some live streaming so that you can see some people who have been playing for a while already, playing head to head and actually dig into what's happening during the game. And so we're going to be doing some of those things on Vampire Wednesdays in the future. So it's good you're all here. It's very exciting. Awesome. So Desiree, are you ready for our next one? I think this is
just show us any card.
Pretty straightforward.
Show us any card. We'll talk about it. So
awesome. Drain them slowly. Very exciting. All right. This is also a scary picture.
It is. I know. I mean, Sarah, you knew what you were getting into. All right, the world of vampires is not friendly. So come on.
That's fair.
So. This is a card for an aggressive deck. And it says, when attack you make deals 1+ non-aggravated damage to a character, but does not defeat them, gain 1 agenda. So a card like this, so you can compare this to the Turf War that is in the Bruja pre-constructed deck. It is interested in defeating characters. If you defeat a non-rival, you score 1 agenda. If you defeat a character with 5 blood potency or higher, you also score 1 agenda. And those are additive. So defeating I don't know why I'm talking about the other one so much, but anyway, just to get it out there. If you defeat a non-rival who happens to also have a 5+ agenda, you'll score 2 agenda. Now, the normal game rule is if you knock out a rival, you score 1. So if you knock out a rival who also has 5 BP or higher, you'll score 2. This one is draining them slowly. You're not looking to knock them out all the time. Maybe you don't want to knock them out because it would unbalance the détente amongst the clans. But what it also means is you're not overly concerned with huge attacks. You just want to make attacks that are likely to get through their attribute defenses, any reactions they might have, things like that. Now, of course, aggravated damage is the easiest way to do that, but this one doesn't allow it because that would just be too easy to automatically, without question, score every time you attacked using aggravated damage. So this one is only non-aggravated damage, but it's a good way to just, they might fight back a little harder, but this one doesn't care. It's just like, hey, do a little damage and you're all good.
Yeah, definitely. And I noticed Keen of Odinata mentioned that we have a lot of variety in the different types of decks that you could be playing. I think that's certainly true. This one, again, really pushes you towards a completely different strategy. I appreciate that. So this one seems relatively straightforward as well.
Yeah.
Anybody have questions about how this one might work? Or anything else you wanted to say about it, Matt?
I think I'm good. Right, Haven, Artist Lofts. So this is a card for people who just might want to have, maybe you have, this is okay, let me read it and then it'll make more sense instead of talking about it first. At the end of your turn, if your leader is exhausted, you may draw one card, then discard one card. So this is something that is good for people who have, the classic utility deck, perhaps, where they have cards for any occasion, but sometimes those occasions just won't come up. Like, for instance, you might put in a couple of influence modifiers hoping to catch some scheming players unaware, and then suddenly, oh, no one's playing a scheme deck. Well, these aren't as useful as they could have been. Granted, you can always discard a card at the end of your turn to heal up one of your vampires, but if you would like to improve your quality of the cards in your hand, this might be a good haven for you, because you could turn that influence modifier into something more useful. So for players who just like to always have options, never want to be without an answer, this is probably the card for them. And this card was made specifically for a play style that I'm sure Sarah likes, always having the correct card at the correct time. Would that be correct?
Yes, I do like to have answers. So I do actually have a question about this, another sort of more generic TCG question. What happens if you run out of cards in your deck?
Sure. If you run out of cards in your library or in your faction deck, nothing happens. It's just going to be more difficult for you to win the game, because you just won't be able to draw from those decks. Now, that's not to say that there won't be some strategies in the future that might try to penalize you for running out of cards, but there's nothing in the game rules for it. So put it that way.
That will be very interesting. So in your play testing, I know there were literally hundreds of hours of play tests for this game over the last many months. Did you have people run out of cards in their deck while playing, especially this haven?
We did not see anybody run out, so that's probably a good sign. And most games run somewhere 10 to 15 rounds, so it's also not a card that you need to take. You don't have to do it at the end of each turn. Like, if you are running a bit low, you probably would. We've definitely had people that got down to like 7 or 8 cards in their deck, and near the end of the game, they're just like, well, someone's like, yeah, go ahead and draw. If you don't like the card you got, you can just discard it, right? I mean, you can just draw a card, look at it and go, nope, that's not the card, and discard it. But when you're running low and you're not sure if the game is going to go for another round or 2 or 3, it might be a good idea to slow down once you're under 10. So
yeah, definitely.
But if you do get down that low in your deck, you're going to have the exact cards in your hand that you want. Let's put it that.
You would hope so. And is there a hand limit? Another important question for this card.
Right. There is not a hand limit. Now, this card does not increase your deck, your hand size. It just improves your card quality, as we like to say.
Yeah, but if there's no hand limit, then you're more
Right.
likely to be able to use this card to get to the combo that you're looking for, because you aren't going to have to be forced to discard cards by a hand limit.
That's true, right. When somebody's got 2 cards in hand, they might like both of those cards and don't want to risk drawing a card that they might not want to discard, so they might not use it. But if you have 8 cards in hand, which you can, using this, you'll almost always find something to discard. There won't be any must-haves in your hand. So, or there'll be some that aren't must-haves, is what I should have said.
Very interesting. Yeah, that is different than a lot of other card games where you don't really worry that much about running out of cards in your library or in your vampire deck. And it also, I really like that you get to choose when you draw at the end of your turn which deck you're drawing from. That gives you just a lot
Right.
more options, a lot more choices. So I
Right.
think
Now,
that's really
we've
fun.
we've been talking a lot about library, but let's talk about faction deck. So this is just draw one card. Whenever you draw a card, you choose what deck you're drawing from. So this card is sometimes used by crafty players to get that secondary character that they really want for their deck. For instance, like the Malkavians like to start with the Govna, but Velvet is also very good for that same strategy. And if you've got the Artist Lofts, you can get to it a little bit faster. So
Interesting.
don't
Yeah, with only
don't forget
six.
the faction deck, because there's only
That's
6
right.
cards in the faction deck. So
Mhm.
and keep in mind, when you discard, you can discard a vampire. You don't have to doesn't have to be a library card. You just have one discard pile with both card types in there.
Oh, that sounds so scary. I don't want to discard any of my vampires. I might need them.
Well, now recall that it's rare for people to have more than 5 characters out, even
It's
rare to have
true.
more than 4, really. So you don't need all of them,
I
unless
need
you
all
get
of them,
some.
Matt.
Well, okay. Unless you have some kind of a prestige windfall, you're unlikely to recruit more than 4. So.
Or if you're playing one of those agendas that we saw previously, where having multiple characters out is a good thing. So this card might actually work really well for that, because you can go through some of those cards faster, find some combos so you can help keep them safe. Interesting.
Yep. Now, because it's end of turn, it's not tactically superior to be drawing faction cards, because you won't be drawing reactions and things like that, or influence modifiers that might help you during other players' turns, because a vampire in hand is worth 2 in the bush, or some kind of colloquialism like that.
I don't think that's how that works.
Maybe not, but anyway, it's like, yeah. So drawing a vampire at end of turn is like, well, it's just going to sit there until it comes around your next turn, then you can recruit it. So it's not an instant gratification on that one.
That's fair. That makes sense.
Yeah, but it is probably it's probably pound for pound, it's probably more efficient if there's a particular vampire you're looking for. That's the way to go, because your Crypt deck only has 6 cards in it, and actually less than 6, because you're going to draw some at the start of game. So if you really need to get to one, that's the way to do it. That's the haven for you.
So we have one more haven, and I want to go through it a little bit fast, because I also have seen 2 relevant questions in chat about things that are happening after the Kickstarter, which is kind of where we're at right now. So let's talk about the last haven really fast, and then I will run through some of that stuff and answer those questions.
Cool.
Dragon Roost. Oh, I like it.
Dragon's Roost. It hasn't shown up for me, but I know what it does. Oh, there we go. All right. This little restaurant in Chinatown, and leader ability. If ready, you may move your leader to the streets to block any attack and gain 1 prestige. So again, if you want to be the captain of the neighborhood watch and spoil somebody's attack, if your leader is ready, you can move them out to the streets and say, you're attacking me. So this is a haven for somebody. This is good if people like playing Hunt the Hunters in your play group. This is a good haven for you, because you can keep them away from those second position. Granted, they'll be doing a lot of aggravated damage to everyone's characters, but maybe you've got a plan for that. So this is a good way, especially if somebody is trying to, oh, I'm at 12 agenda. All I need to do is take out one citizen for the win. And you're like, not so fast. And then you gain some prestige because everyone's like so happy that you prevented someone from winning. So
you can actually block when it says any attack. That also includes attacking any other vampires that aren't yours, attacking any citizens in the street. You can block not just your own vampires from being attacked.
Correct. Yes, you can anything. A mortal out of the city deck, someone else's vampire. If someone is down to one vampire and they're about ready to get taken out of the game and someone else is going to win, you can step in there. So this is a good haven. Actually, I would say this. Anyone who's watching this is obviously a pro. When you're teaching your friends who are clueless, this is a fun haven to use because you can right some wrongs. Put it that way. People like getting a little help now and then in an otherwise very competitive game, and so this is a fun one to show people that there's always a way to prevent someone from dying / winning / taking out someone else's best character. So
I think this goes back to a theme that we talked about a little bit last week, which is an enemy of my enemy is my friend. And even though you are trying to win the game for yourself, you have a particular rival, and somebody else who's maybe getting beat up by that person might want a little bit of help sometimes, and they might reciprocate if you can do that correctly. Yep. And you add some conspiracies and some schemes to that, and that can really make a big difference.
Right. Yeah, if you're the kind of person who doesn't want someone to go from 12 agenda to 13 agenda too quickly, this might be the haven for you.
Definitely. And I do really appreciate that when playing the game, that there is quite a sort of wave that you go through while you're playing, where you all start out and you're just doing your own thing, and then you form these little alliances and then break those alliances, and it's a really a cool path that you go through each time you play.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we've talked about some very cool havens and agendas that are in the Crypt Pack, but I did also want to just give everyone a reminder of how everything works, because this was a Kickstarter project, and let you know what's coming, because it's not over. We had all this excitement, we had a lot of fun doing this thing together, and now we aren't just waiting until it gets delivered. There's all sorts of stuff that happens in between. So last week, the Kickstarter ended, and we put up our late pledge banner. So if you have friends who maybe missed it, who jumped in at the last minute and thought it looked cool but just didn't press that pledge button, they can still get in on it. So they can late pledge now, and basically they'll just be put into a holding pattern. And then next week, after we have everything set up for the campaign in CrowdOx, which is our pledge manager that we use, then as soon as that's all ready to go, everyone, whether they late pledge or whether they pledge during the Kickstarter, will get an invite to their unique survey. When you go through that survey, it's going to ask you a bunch of questions like, what's your address? What's your phone number? Do you want to add any extra add-ons? So if you wanted maybe another copy of the core set, that type of thing, you'll have all those options in there. Everything will be laid out. So you'll get to choose any of those, and then you pay for shipping, and then you're ready to go. If, let's say, you move, your address changes for some reason, anything like that happens in between now and when it actually ships out, you can go back to that same survey link and update all your stuff until we're really close to being able to ship this to you. At that point, about a month or so before the campaign actually, before your box actually ends up on your doorstep, we're gonna lock all those addresses in so we can send them to our fulfillment partner. And we use Quartermaster Logistics in the US. We use VFI in Asia. If you live somewhere else and you want to know exactly who we're using, let me know and I can send all that info to you. So then once we send all those addresses in, if you move between the time that we lock the addresses and when it ships, you can still send us your address. You'll just have to do it a little bit more manually. And if you have questions about that, you can always write to kickstarter@renegadegames.com, and they'll be able to answer your questions about that. And so that's how Kickstarter fulfillment stuff works. And we'll update you all the time about where our shipment is. We'll let you know when it leaves our factory, when it's on the way to our fulfillment warehouses. We'll give you updates along the way. So if you have any questions, we will make sure that you get all of those. All right, I see there are a few other questions there. I'll go through those in a second. So in between, we are just about to send all of the print files to the factory so they can actually put those into their machines, hit the print button, get everything packed up into boxes. We're making special outer shipping cartons just for Kickstarter backers. So you will get all your stuff will be packed in one beautiful little package all the way from China to your doorstep. So no problems unless you get add-ons and stuff, and we'll pack those separately. So yeah, all of that should happen pretty seamlessly. And so we're sending the print files next week. And then we'll also have all those updated files so that we can re-put those into Tabletopia. We're going to be letting you play again for 1 weekend only. It's going to be October 9th, 10th, and 11th when we're doing our next Renegade Con. So if you guys want to actually jump on and play, we'll be doing it that weekend. So that should be fun. And then we'll have, during our Vampire Wednesdays, we'll have a couple different people playing to show you a little bit more of the gameplay, actually get some cards on the table, and let you see what that looks like. So all of that should be lots of fun. I did have a couple questions I saw in chat while we were going. One of them was about the community manager position. Yes, we are looking for a community manager. No, I have not had time to go through the massive amounts of emails that we received to start that process, but very, very soon. And once we have that person on board, we will introduce them here on Vampire Wednesdays, which will be very exciting because I love interacting with you guys, but it is a lot of extra time and effort, and I want to make sure that it doesn't get dropped because you guys are so important to us. So I'm going to be passing off some of those things to that new person when they get hired. In the meantime, once that all happens, we're also working on our website and adding more features to that. If you go to vampirerivals.com, you can see what we have going on right now with the forums, and we also have a Discord channel set up, but we have a lot of features that we're still adding to that, like our card database, which is about to be finalized. Matt has been working hard on making sure all of the updates we've been putting in are in there.
So, well, you know, we made some changes during the Kickstarter, like adding influence conflict to the schemes and a couple other just little quality changes you guys had picked up on. So we had to update the real cards and then update our playtest cards, because and all that. So it was an undertaking.
So yes, but we want to make sure any changes that have been made right now are in all of the places, including on the real cards. But it also gives us a chance in the future, if we did miss something, there will be a place where you can go and see the most updated, accurate information all in one place, but also build decks. You will have all of the tournament access stuff that we talked about in previous Vampire Wednesdays. So tons of stuff going on there. The website will be very cool.
I can do a little speed round of questions here, right?
Okay, yes, go for it. Matt, you asked me questions. I'll answer.
So hopefully there isn't too much recursion in the game. There's actually only one card that does recursion at the moment in the Malkavian deck. Any cards that play from the discard pile, no. Is being decked to lose condition, no. Long-term investment on first round is handy. Is there a short-term investment? There's not a short-term investment, but you can just spend 1 prestige to put 2 prestige from the general supply onto it, and on your next turn, on your next 2 turns, gain 1 prestige. So you can turn a long-term investment into a short-term investment by underfunding it, shall we say. What's the likelihood this amazing game will be all the amazing bits by December? I don't know. Hopefully good. Hopefully by December, if the post
We're-
office is still open.
We are still pushing very hard for this. We did get some worrying communication from FedEx today. Usually we use FedEx for most of that shipping, and they are anticipating a lot of extra packages during this particular time. So we actually just got a notice saying between November 2nd and January 19th, we have these extra fees, we have all these extra problems, it's going to cost more to ship packages. You guys don't need to worry about that. We are not charging you any more than what we already told you for shipping, but it does give me this little concern that maybe things will take longer to get to places than we'd hoped. There's only so much we can do.
We probably need to end this before it completely blows up and erases the entire thing.
Yes.
And Desiree, feel free to do a little bit of editing so that it seems like everything was super smooth and only the people who are here live know the truth.
Will do.
How about that? All right. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll be back next week to show you some cool stuff.
Bye everyone. Thank you.
Bye.